So we got our NB tail light here. In order to take it apart, we got to start by removing those 3 screws here, and they are a Torx bit. It says T-7 is the size. I'm also going to go ahead and take these out. And it's all wrapped around this little hook set up here in the back. I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it in the oven. Alright, this is going to be the really scary part for a lot of people, but I've actually done this quite a few times and I've never had any trouble. So what I'm going to do, I've actually already preheated. I've set it at 225 degrees. It's actually 200 is the minimum for my stove. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, there's plastic in the oven. That's a really bad idea. Well, it is, but we're doing it at such a low temperature. We just need to heat up the adhesive that holds the lens onto the housing. And there's going to be a couple steps that we're going to do. I've seen a couple different videos out there. Some of them are good, some of them are not so good. I like to use a piece of cardboard and lay down on the rack to keep the rack from burning or kind of melting into any of our plastic. The other thing too is I'm going to put it on the lens side up. And obviously I've already made sure that my rack has enough room for my light. So I'm going to go ahead and close it now. It's going to go ahead and bake. I'm going to set a timer for about 15 minutes. Somewhere between 200 and 250 for anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. It kind of depends. I've done Chevy Silverado headlights and they seem to need a bit more heat than a lot of the more Japanese brands. So while the NB2 light is in the oven, I'm going to kind of show you what we're going to do when we pull the light out of the oven, because we want to get the lens off of the housing as quickly as possible while it's still hot. You'll notice that there's kind of a lip that goes around most of the tail light, but right here where there's this little flap that kind of bolts on the top of the trunk area, the lip actually doesn't cover that area. So this is where I'm going to start, just getting it up enough to where I can get under it enough to pull it out. Now, one of the other things you have to be careful of is the light is actually curved quite a bit, and if on the bottom you'll see there are these kind of lines in the molding, this is actually the direction you want to be parallel with that as you take the lens off. So I've actually had it before down here where I'm trying to get a screwdriver to pry it out, and I actually break off some of the inner lip of the lens part because I was trying to pry it out this way instead of making it go up this way. So it sounds kind of complicated, and once you see it for the first time, like, you'll get it. Another thing that we're going to have to focus on as we're pulling the lens off is there's actually these little kind of clips that will hold the lens onto the body. So I actually need to get our screwdriver in here and help pry the body away from the lens a little bit. Alright, there's our 15 minutes, and again, I am wearing gloves because this is going to be hot. It might not burn us. Woo, yeah, it's definitely hot, even with my gloves on. But oh yeah, look at that. I barely have to put any pressure on it at all, and the lens just kind of glides right off. Whew, yeah, that's hot. I'm telling you though, that 15-minute mark at 200 degrees, I've had the best luck. Oh, I forgot about the little tabs over here on the bottom. Just slowly moving my screwdriver around, and then this tar kind of adhesive will get all over your screwdriver, and it's kind of nasty stuff, really. So now that this is coming off, and again, I need to go kind of straight up with it. Let me close and shut that off. And you'll see all the tar adhesive stuff coming off. So I'm going to clean that up real quick. I am going to let it cool off because it is rather warm before we do the next step. I want to talk a little bit about the bottom base. We're actually not going to do anything with this. In my other tail light, I use the tracing LED arrows over here, and this piece actually comes out. There's a couple little clips and stuff that hold it in place, and I had taken this and I had cut some ABS, actually the same material as this, and made a plate that goes over this to hold the LED, and it's okay, like it's kind of neat, but I can see it inside the tail light in the daytime, and it kind of bugs me. And there's a couple of problems that it creates that I don't really want to try to solve, and that is that now you're using an LED light as a turn signal, and it doesn't pull the same load, so you get the what's called the hyper flash. And with the tracing arrows, you only get the first arrow with the hyper flash. It doesn't give the electricity doesn't flow long enough to it to actually trace all the way across. So I've looked into a couple solutions. Yes, you could get the little piece that plugs in that uses the electricity to generate heat, and it pulls a little bit more from the system, and it tricks it into thinking that there's a light there. But those things get really, really hot, and you have to be careful where you mount them. And to me, if it gets that hot that it would melt plastic, it's a fire hazard, and I don't have to worry about mounting in my trunk somewhere and my carpet catching on fire, anything like that. The other solution is I actually purchased it because I had planned on doing those from the beginning, is a little module that plugs in under the dash for your turn signal relay, and it changes what the car is looking for as far as the draw from the lights. But you have to change out all the turn signal bulbs to LEDs just so that every light has the same draw. And I really don't want to go and change all of my lights literally just to get one little tracing arrow. So I have a bright red LED bulb that'll go in here for the brake light. We're going to mount the running light on the lens, and then we're just going to use in this video, we're going to show you just how to use the original OEM bulb. We're just going to rewire it so that this is then the turn signal, and it'll basically give the same effect. To me, running that 3-inch LED module that I had picked up as my brake light, it just turned out that it wasn't quite bright enough, and it's a safety issue. You know, I don't want anybody rear-ending me. We're already in a small car as it is. The way that I did the other light is actually took each little piece here. There's actually just a little rubber boot that sits over the wires, and then these wires go to the connectors inside here. Well, if you take this out, you can actually yank the connectors out and just gut this whole thing. I just took the wires, ran it through this connector, plugged the connector back in, and I just filled in the back of this with some RVT. So if you really feel compelled to do that, that's how I did the other one. But like I said, I wasn't happy with it. So we have this 120 millimeter ring from Super Bright LEDs. Is actually affordable compared to the other one that I originally tried. Now the only problem is this isn't actually a perfect circle. It's an oval, and this doesn't fully fit all the way inside. What it does do, however, is one side will fit all the way on, and the other side there's just enough that the LEDs that kind of stick off will go right around this lip. So all the way in on this side, and then just clipped in enough to hold it there on the other side. That's what you see on the other side, or in my other video. So now the way that we're actually going to glue this down, We're going to use two different silicones. First, we're going to start with clear RVT silicone. I just bought this at AutoZone down the street. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay a bead all the way around this, because there is actually some depth to it. There's like a channel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay down RVT so it's basically flush with this. And the reason why we're going to use clear is because we actually do want the light to go through the RVT, through the reflector, and through the other side. Now, you might be thinking, wow, that's a lot of stuff for it to go through. Isn't it going to dim it down? Actually, we have to install a module to dim this down even further, because it's so bright, it would be as bright as like a tail light. So there's no worries about it being too bright. And then once we let this dry overnight, we're going to put black RVT around it on the top, and we have to get really good around the edges here too, so that we don't get any light leaking around it. Let me get my RVT here. I'm just going to go some of these spots are a little thin, so I'll have to go back. And that does not smell very good. You want to make sure that it gets a solid piece all the way through, all the way around. Otherwise, if you have a gap, you might not get light evenly in the ring. All right, that's pretty good, I'd say. So, that gets pretty close. I'm going to try to make it even all the way around. I got a little too much on this side and not enough over here. I'll try to deposit some. Alright, I'm feeling pretty good about that. Alright, so now what I am going to do is I'm going to put this kind of on the bottom. So now I'm going to push this down in. And make sure that we got a good amount all the way around. Yep. All this is looking good. Now on this side, because the LED actually went in, you can see there's a bulge. I actually want to remove this, because like I mentioned before, we're going to go around over this with black RVT, and that's going to help hold in the light. So we want to have enough room to lay more on top of this later. That's good until tomorrow. So this stuff, and we put this on pretty thick. So I actually think instead of the 24 hours, I'm going to wait 48 hours just to make sure that that gets enough time to really dry and harden all the way through. When I did the other one, I did it 24 hours after, and it was still a little wet. I mean, it was still, like, it was dry on the outside, but deep in the middle, it still had a ways to go. So I want to make sure this dries really, really good. So this is definitely not a project that you're just going to do like in a day. I highly recommend that you buy a second set of lights so that you can keep driving your car while you're doing this. Because the other thing is too is you don't want to do this to the original, because what happens if you screw something up? So now we've let this dry for a couple days. You can feel it, and it is definitely solid. Some parts seems to have shrunk a little bit, and that's fine. I'm sure at this point you're really excited to kind of get an idea of what it looks like. So the easiest way to do this, there's two wires. One is silver, one is gold, or a bronze color. And if I remember correctly, the bronze is the negative. And you can just take a regular 9-volt battery. The light that we have here is, I think, like 8 to 14 or 16 volts. Most automotive lights are going to have a range like that, because you're not going to be running a true 12 volts all the time. Once the car gets running, your alternator gets going, it's going to go up a couple volts. And usually 9 volt is enough to make it come on. So what I want to point out here is that when we turn it on, you can see that there's a lot of light that just kind of goes in every direction. So what we're going to try to do right now is we're going to take some black RVT silicone, and we're going to wrap it, or kind of just mold it around this whole assembly here to keep any of the light from spilling into these other areas where we don't want it to go. But if we look at it from the front, it's actually looking pretty good. So we're like halfway there. This is probably the second toughest part, next to actually mounting this up. Once we get this wrapped in black, we just got to drill a hole for this wire to come through the back of the housing, the base part. So basically we're just going to drill like a little hole up here. Oh, that's the bottom. And drill a hole somewhere, like maybe under here. Let that wire come out. We're just going to wire that into the regular housing and then put it back together. So I don't want to say we're in the home stretch yet, but it's looking pretty good. So what I've got is I've got some black RVT silicone. I've got a flathead screwdriver. I've got a little piece of cardboard here. This is actually a template from when I made the angled turn signals, but I'm just going to put some silicone on here, scoop it up with the screwdriver, and then use that to kind of fill in some of these gaps around here. Obviously when we get around the sides, we want to be as careful as possible, but if you spill a little bit, the nice thing about the silicone is it wipes up easy. The only big recommendation here is don't wear nice clothes, because this RVT is really nasty stuff. If it gets on any of your clothes, it'll absolutely ruin it. I've already ruined a pair of shorts and a pair of pants just doing my other tail light. So I'm also going to wear a glove for this, and I've got lots of paper towel here as well. I think this inside edge is probably going to be the toughest, because we want to get as close as we can with it. But this is just something that you just got to take your time and just really focus on getting it right where it needs to be. You want to make sure that you get, I just noticed there's a couple like little bubble spots where I kind of missed a little bit. You definitely want to go back and make sure that it's all completely covered, because you don't want any light leaking anywhere. Now this black stuff, you don't have to get it super thick. It does not let very much light go through at all. It's pretty much a full blackout. Now this part right here, there's a little lip that kind of sticks out from the reflector. This part's going to be a little difficult to get the RVT around, so I'm just going to kind of shove it in there and do like the best that I can to try to get a little bit of black around there. But I'm not going to get overly worried about it, because the more you put on, it might show around the ring a little bit. You can't actually see through the red part. I'm just going to do my best to get a little bit through there. A little bit of light leak. We can't stop it all. But we could get most of it. Alright, so one of the things that's happening is I put the RVT on. I don't know if you can see, but the black is kind of getting on the actual lens itself. It's not looking perfect, so I'm going to take a Q-tip. I'm going to clean off some of the RVT that has spilled over. But again, have to be very, very careful. Alright, looks like we got most of it all the way around. So now it's time to do the top. I feel like I'm decorating a cake. And this is all the icing, and I've got to make it like perfectly flat. Alright, now I didn't necessarily leave this for last on purpose. It's just kind of the way it ended up. And you don't have to get too crazy with it. But I'm just kind of bending the wire straight up and then just laying it thick all around it. And this is basically done. Make sure my wires don't get in my RVT there. So, I mean, it looks pretty good. You can see a little bit of black coming through. This won't be as noticeable, these parts. Let me show you what I mean. So, if you notice around here, there's just a little bit of black that you can kind of see through the lens. But when the lens is together, these areas will be in black cavities, so it won't be noticeable. I try to clean this side up. This is probably going to be the most visible side. So that's where I took the Q-tip and got some of it. I mean, it's not perfect. It's really tough because this area sticks out, so you're trying to kind of get it into like a crevice. But yeah. And then if you want to test it to see if there's any areas that we missed and kind of need to go back and adjust, we can grab another 9-volt here. And you can see, notice that this time, definitely not a lot of light that bleeds around the edge. So we shouldn't see much light at all looking at it from the back side, but if we look at it from the other side, yeah, that looks pretty good. I'm very happy with that. So now I'm just going to go through, and I can see a couple spots that I kind of missed where the light's leaking through the black. I'm just going to go over those spots a little bit more, and then this is going to be ready to dry. So when this goes on, I've got this guy is gonna come out near the top. Now I could drill a hole, but I think what's gonna be easy enough is I'm just gonna take my little poker here, because I really don't want to pull out my Dremel. We don't need a very big hole. Alright, so now let's check. Perfect. So, and then it's just going to come out right there, and we can wire that into the harness. But before I put this back together, just to ensure that we get a good seal, I'm going to take a little RVT silicone and I'm going to run a bead all the way around here just to give it that little extra. Alright, back in the kitchen, got it set at 225. Got my cardboard in there. Throw my light. And I'm going to give it like 10 minutes. We don't need to go quite as long as last time. We want to make sure it comes apart easy, but this, we just got to push it a little bit in. And while that's going, went ahead and got those little screws that we took off and my Torx bit handy so we can screw it together as soon as I take the headlight out or tail light out of the oven. Alright, got my gloves again. You can also tell because the little clips are in where they're supposed to be. I'm also going to take this opportunity to get off some of that adhesive. So now let's get in our screws. Alright, so now that it's cooled off a bit, now we can seal this up. I'm just going to take some black silicone that I have left here. Just put a good amount. So we need to let all this RVT dry and the adhesive settle, so I'm going to wait till tomorrow. Take our amber light out. We're going to put in this red one. That's going to go in the middle. And our three-way goes over here. And our backup goes there. So here's a real quick way to change brake and turn signal. Well, first off, you're going to need to know which wire is which. And I'm going to show a diagram on the screen, but basically I figured out all the wiring already. So the green and black, with the green with the black stripe is the positive of the turn signal. And the solid green is the positive of the brake light. So if we swap those two, our brake light will now be in the middle and our turn signal will be the bright light over here. So I found out that if you take a really tiny screwdriver and stick it in there. There's just a little clip that holds that together. And the nice thing is that you don't even have to splice the wire. If you just pull the green and the black stripe out of this harness, and this is the one that plugs into the car. Here we go. Plug him in the top, plug him in the bottom. Now we've changed those lights, and we didn't have to splice any wires yet. So basically this guy's done. I'll put him in here. And one of the other things I want to mention too is this is an NB2 tail light, and the NB2 tail light has a unique pigtail harness here with the lights on it than the NB1 harness. So everything that I'm talking about now is going to refer to the NB2 housing. Alright, so now we have our white wire here, and our white wire is actually the running light, which we now need to use this to feed our ring, and we also need to tie into ground somewhere. So we can either tie in all of the grounds, just go to one. If you notice here, you've got 3 black wires, but on this side there's only 1, so you have a common ground. So all we have to do is make sure that we ground out the negative on this to any of these black wires, and basically that's it. It's real simple, and it can be undone. That is the key feature to this, is everything that we're doing can be reversed, and you can go back to stock, which I think any mod that you can do that has the possibility of going back to stock, I mean that's a big plus. So we need to splice our white wire. I'm going to do it right in the middle. That'll give us the most amount of room if we have to splice this back together. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut the ground as well, just so in that way I can get some heat shrink tubing on these ends. Now one of the other things that I did is I used one of these little modules to plug in between the car and the ring, just so that I could adjust the brightness of the ring. So I went ahead and took one of these kind of adjustment modules. I'm going to run it off of a 9-volt battery, and one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to check the brightness. I already played with it for a minute, but yeah, how about we not touch those two together. And these have a memory to them, so I'm going to go ahead and set it at its lowest setting. That's what I want for my running light, and that's how I have the first one in, and I'm pretty happy with the setup. It seems to be pretty reliable so far. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wire this in so that it's permanent in between the pigtail harness and the light itself, and then I'm just going to wrap this in some black electrical tape just to make sure that no dust or water or anything gets to it, and then that way we can always come back and adjust it later. And I'm not going to worry about cutting this down or making it smaller. I'd actually rather have a small loom of wire behind than to cut myself too short, because there's enough room. We can tuck it in and you know, tie it up. Now I've done a lot of car stereos and things like that, and I've always used electrical tape, and I've never had a problem with wires coming undone or just bad connections or anything like that. So I'm actually just going to use electrical tape and then use heat shrink tubing over top of it just to help keep the electrical tape together, because since I do live in Arizona and it gets so hot during the day, I want to make sure this stuff isn't going to melt, because I've seen electrical tape get pretty soft when it gets really hot. The other reason, which is not a very good reason, is the heat shrink tubing I bought is just a little too big, and so this adds a little bit of thickness to it. But either way, it'll be double insulated. I think this is probably overkill. I like to get both sides when I do it, just to make sure I get the maximum shrinkage. Alright, so now for this cable is pretty long. I think I will cut it down a bit just to make things a little easier when we have to do the wire tuck. I mean, come on, this thing's over a foot long. Again, I'm paying attention to my wiring. I've done this so many times I kind of know, so I forget that I need to say it, but I'm doing the bronze copper color to the negative, and the silver is going to go to the positive. Oh, I made a mistake. Check it out. Forgot to connect my negative up to this other negative here. So, back apart we go. Now our white wire is not going to do anything because we're not going to run the low intensity light on this side. I am, however, just going to wrap it up. Okay, now everything should be in place. Now originally all of these wires wrapped up from the bottom. Now all I want to do is I'm going to wrap this up with electrical tape just to make sure that no dust and water get inside. Just going to tuck that kind of down in there. And basically our light's ready to go in. Put in my other light. I'm going to pull the rubber until it's flush. Plug it in. Now let's see what we got. Does off to the side. To show you the difference between my first one and this one,
I've been running the taillights for a while now and they seem to be pretty reliable, but I ran into an unexpected consequence where the cruise control stopped working. And some research on a forum, I found that for whatever reason, running an LED bulb messes with part of the cruise control system and makes it stop working. So I plan to actually replace the LED brake light with just a red incandescent bulb because I don't want to mess with other modules and stuff.
so you notice that this side's a lot brighter. I feel a lot better about that, and it's way less work. It's just a bulb rather than trying to mount a module and all kinds of other crap. Once you've plugged in and ensured that everything is working, put the bolts and everything back in place and screw it down. And you're done.